So I started, this is really loud, isn't it? I started writing these articles for the Crescent City Jewish News that come out every Friday. And I write them pretty far in advance. So when they come out on Friday, a lot of times they're news to me also, kind of teaching myself what's going on. But the one I wrote for last night had to do with why Simchat Torah is still going on, starting for Reform Jews and not for Orthodox or conservative. And the decision to do this comes from two things. Number one, the Torah tells us that Sukkot lasts 7 days, and then we have this 8th day, Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, which is today. But the decision was really made when American Jews decided they wanted to be connected with the state of Israel, because in Israel, they followed the same calendar we do. They don't add an extra day to holidays because there's no need. That's the source of where the holidays start. And that's what was kind of running through my head as I was up in the wee hours last night watching news alerts, because we know exactly what was happening with Jews in Israel last night, because it was the same thing that was happening here. We had our kiddos carrying the big stuffed Torahs and waving their Israeli flags. And now I don't know that all Jews around the world had a second line marching around their parking lot with their Torah scrolls. But last night, as we welcomed Simchat Torah, it was this great celebration of our commitment to upholding our faith. And when we pass the little baby Torahs to our 4 and 5-year-olds, it's a reminder that they're the next in line to hold these scrolls and carry them forward. And you can imagine on a night like last night, y'all walked past all the little stuffed Torahs and the little flags as you came in here, just how wonderful it is to see that. And imagine that being interrupted by thousands and thousands of rockets being fired into our state. By all reports so far, and they're far from final, between 2,500 and 5,000 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip into the state of Israel since the start of Simchat Torah. And reports are saying up to 100 Israelis have been killed. Israelis have been taken hostage into the Gaza Strip. There are videos of places near Gaza, and you asked if the Iron Dome held up. Well, it kind of looks like, and again, this is very preliminary, it kind of looks like that the rocket fire was kind of a cover for an invasion. But not necessarily desired to cause damage, but while these rockets were in the air, Hamas terrorists came in, infiltrated the border of Israel, and started these attacks on our cities. And there are videos you can find on Facebook, on X, on used to be Twitter, on TikTok, of Israelis kind of bunkered in their homes while Palestinian terrorists roam their streets with guns. You can see videos of them firing at cars and destroying civilian areas. It seems like a very comparable situation to the Yom Kippur War, which was 50 years ago on Yom Kippur. It feels like this came as a surprise, and not a lot of things come as a surprise to the state of Israel and its intelligence. Hamas has obviously claimed responsibility for this. Hamas is a terrorist organization that operates the government in the Gaza Strip. And one of the first things I'm going to ask everybody to just take note of is when I say there have been 100 deaths among the Israelis, these are generally not soldiers. These are people walking the street, driving their cars, walking their kids. These are civilians. And the response around the world is pretty much what you would expect from the countries that are friendly with Israel. They're condemning this attack. From the countries that are still not quite friends with Israel, they are either praising Hamas for the attack, or they're doing this thing that happens every time Israel is attacked, which is they're asking for everybody to calm down. They're asking for the violence to cease. They're asking for both Israelis and Palestinians to bring the temperature down. You know, as if we could allow our state to be attacked and then say, okay, you're right, let's take the temperature down. We won't respond. We'll just take those losses. Wait till the next time it happens. As you can imagine, I have feelings about this. On a general Shabbat, my Zionist level is pretty high. I brought my friends here with me today, and while Israel is at war, every prayer we do in this congregation is going to be with the flags of Israel at our backdrop. And I'm thankful to stand with a clergy partner who I think is the same level of Zionist me. I'm just older, so I have more of it, but it's the same based on our ages. And I really love that, knowing that every time I lead services, I'm standing with a good Zionist. So, what happens next? This is a very different type of attack. This is not poking the bear. This is declaring war on the bear. And in past attacks, we've seen this kind of pattern where the terrorists in Hamas try to create havoc. They try to create terror. They try to disrupt the way of life for people who live in Israel, which, by the way, never hurts to point out that Israel is about a third Arab and about 20% Muslim and Palestinian. It's a place where when Israelis are under attack, that doesn't just mean Jews. It means Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze, Baha'i, Bedouins. So the first thing I will tell everybody, as if I haven't already been talking for 7 minutes, is be careful where you get your news from. I mentioned this on Yom Kippur, but I highly recommend when looking for news about Israel, you go to Times of Israel. Times of Israel tends to report on the news without, from my standpoint, a lot of political bias. You can tell when there's bias with the language. So some news sites describe this as Palestinian militants. I wish they were militants. I wish they were militants, because over the past several decades of this conflict between the Israelis and Hamas, or the Palestinians, it hasn't been a war, an army fighting an army. It's been a terrorist organization attacking civilians. And when you're fighting against an ism, like terrorism, it's a lot more difficult to defend. It's not like the old days where the British Army was here and the American Army was here, and you could see who you're fighting against, and it was soldier against soldier. Hamas doesn't want to fight that way because their soldiers are no match for the Israeli soldiers. What they count on is making these attacks and then assuming, and they always assume correctly, that Israel won't respond in kind, because they never do. 100 civilians are killed. Israel's not going to go in and kill 100 civilians. They're an ethically bound army that is guided by the Torah, and they won't do it. The attacks that have come back today are striking Gaza, Hamas, war sites, targets. What Hamas hopes is to further the disconnect between the world and Israel, to create a sense of isolation in Israel. They're a cowardly army that fires in the night at civilians and then hides behind children So when Israel strikes back at terror targets, there's a better chance that Israel will kill a civilian, and then they can show that on the news. Nothing is better for Hamas than Israel killing one of their children. Think about that for a minute. That type of visual, that type of emotional capital is what their end game is here. To isolate, to demonize, to devalue the lives of Jews in Israel. Now, Netanyahu spoke this morning, maybe last night, depending on the timing of, the later I stay up following Israel's news, the more fuzzy I get on what time it actually is, where I am and what they are. But he said we're at war. He said this is not an operation. This is not a defensive position. Israel is at war. And I think he's right. I think we've done a remarkable job over the decades at showing patience and tolerance. You know, at times I've stood up here and said, imagine we were in Texas and Mexico decided to fire 5,000 rockets into Houston. You think America would just say, all right, it didn't kill anybody, so we're going to just let it happen? It's a shocking double standard that Israel's held to. And for decades, we have allowed our neighbors to just constantly attempt at our own destruction. And what other country on the planet would ever be expected to live that way? Nobody. Nobody would. Now, what's happening around Israel right now, you know, Hamas runs the Gaza Strip, and the Palestinian Authority runs the West Bank. And Hezbollah, which is an Iran proxy, is largely in Lebanon. And as of right now, the attacks are coming from Gaza. Now, the Hamas spokesperson came out and said, you know, this is the war. You know, if you have a gun, grab your gun. It's time to fight. The Palestinians in Israel have not heeded that call. The Palestinians in the West Bank have not taken up arms, and Lebanon has been quiet. And one can only assume that's because Israel has kind of explained to them what will happen if they jump into this fight. And I don't think they want any part of it. Hamas doesn't particularly like the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority doesn't particularly like Hezbollah. So they are all supporters of the Palestinian cause. They're just different. You know, the Palestinian Authority is more likely to cooperate and work with the state of Israel for mutual peace than Hamas is. And you know, there's almost an echo of these earlier wars where, you know, Israel at each one of these wars would beg the other armies to stay out of it. You know, when Israel preemptively took out the Egyptian Air Force in 1967, they told Jordan, you know, stay on the sidelines. You know, the war is over. We've taken out their Air Force. And of course, Egypt said, we've got them right where we want them. Come in the fight. And they did. And it's only because of that that Israel even has the West Bank, or had the West Bank. And it's the only reason we have the Western Wall now is because they wouldn't stay out of it. So where we are now, over the last year or so, you've heard me talk about a lot of the infighting in Israel politically. That is now officially on the back burner. The heads of the political parties in Israel have gotten up and said very clearly, there is no right, there is no left, there's just Israel. And the reservists who, throughout the judicial protests, have said, if we're called, we're not coming, they're coming. The reservists are ready to fight. Israel is as united as ever, and there will be answers that need to be found in the coming days, weeks, and months about how something like this could happen without Israel knowing about it. Why wasn't the preparedness the way it should be? There's going to be a Golda Meir type question given to Netanyahu and his government about this. But that's for later. That's for later. I will point out that Netanyahu and Biden have been friends almost their whole lives. Well, 40 years, which for them is like, what, a quarter of their lives? But they've known each other forever, and they have been friends for a long time, and they have spoken to each other. America has offered its full support, as have their allies in Europe, Germany, France, England. They've all offered support. It's interesting to follow the comments and the feedback that's coming from these states that are starting to make peace with Israel. I've heard some speculation that the timing of this attack might be related to how close Israel is at making peace with Saudi Arabia. Whenever Israel is about to make peace, which again, it's a new phenomenon, but every time Israel makes peace with an Arab country and the Palestinians don't get any closer to their own state, they tend to get upset and want to halt the peace process. That is just speculation. May turn out to be true, but it's speculation at this moment. But keep an eye on what they're saying. You'll find three reactions. You'll find, we support Israel all the way. You'll find, let's take the temperature down and cease the violence. And you'll find, we support Hamas. You can fit them into those three categories. And how they respond should tell you kind of how their thinking is about Jews and Israel in general. So from here, from our congregation in Metairie, Louisiana, what do? Well, at the moment, we pray. The goal of terror is to disrupt our way of life. That's the definition of it. And this morning, it's Simchat Torah, it's Yizkor, and we are going to celebrate our Torah. We're going to roll back to the beginning and read Bereshit. We're going to honor all those people on our walls, people in our hearts who have given their lives, dedicated their lives to upholding Jewish community here in Gates of Prayer in Metairie. We are going to keep these flags behind our lecterns. I guess when we're on the beam, I'll give you one, and then I'll take one too. Split them to the two of us. Our prayers are going to be to the east as we go. But the things that I called for on Yom Kippur and on last year's Yom Kippur about engaging with Israel, about studying Israel, about following the news in Israel, about being Jewish out loud, these are the things that are our responsibilities this time in a fight like this. We're not going to take up arms and go to Israel. Well, some of you might. I don't know. My wife would not let me do that, I don't think. But this battle is being fought online too. There's going to be attempts to demonize Israel. There's going to be attempts to equivocate a terrorist army that is trying to kill civilians with an army that's trying to defend its civilians. And we can't let anybody get away with that. Whatever social media, whatever circles you run in, whatever lunchtime conversations you have, if somebody says what Israel is doing and what the Palestinians are doing are the same, we have to correct that. It's not the same. Israel has never started a war. Israel has never targeted civilians in a fight. And if by some chance a civilian is harmed because of an Israeli operation, the army is investigated and they are put on trial for that. They're held accountable. It's not the way Israel works. It is the most moral army that has ever existed on the face of this earth. And we as Jews need to make sure that those who aren't familiar become familiar. Now, as y'all can imagine, the longer this goes on, the more I'm going to talk about it. And I'm here for any questions y'all have. I'm here for any concerns you have. And if anything I've said makes you question how you feel or how I feel, this is a good place for those questions. The synagogue, whether it's Wednesday, every Wednesday we gather together just to schmooze at lunchtime, or if it's an oneg after a Shabbat, or if it's on a morning like this. For those of you who are Saturday morning regulars, know sometimes we just come in here and talk, or a Torah study, or we may have to have special learning sessions. We're going to do all of that here. But what I hope everybody will do, as our brothers and sisters in Israel are facing attack, is stand with them. And if it helps, I've recommended this in the past. There's an app you can download on your phone. It's called Tseva Adom, Red Alert. This is how Israelis know when there is a rocket attack in their vicinity. And if you download this app, you will be notified as well every time a rocket fires. Now imagine between the time you went to bed last night and the time you woke up this morning, that alarm went off 5,000 times. Now for us, it's an annoyance. But for them, that's 5,000 times where their life may be at risk. 5,000 times where they might have to get up and go into their bomb shelters. 5,000 times when they have to take their kids and put them under their beds and cover them and shield them. So, as I mentioned, 25 minutes into our service that hasn't started yet, we're going to do what we came here to do, which is read our Torah, celebrate our Torah. We're going to say Yizkor. We're going to honor the people who have made it so we can stand here today and read our Torah. And as Jews, this is how we do things. We compartmentalize. A talk like this doesn't belong in the middle of a Simchat Torah service or in a Yizkor service. So we're going to, in a moment, shift from this talk about Israel to our Yizkor and Simchat Torah service. And the way we're going to do that is by reciting Hatikva, Israel's national anthem. The words that I had put on the collar of my talis, which I love dearly. We're going to rise together. I'm going to add our wonderful Zionist Chazanit up here, Julianne, to lead us in the words of Hatikva. And you don't have to turn so far to see the flags anymore. Please be seated. Is there anybody who maybe came over from across the lake, who knows how to open our gates